So there was a few things I wanted to go over before we get into the main presentation, and that was some quotes that were given to me. Harvard Medical School professor Bohdan Pohamek was quoted as saying, "The supply of tissues is one of the major constraints we face in transplantation medicine today, and organ banking technology would dramatically help resolve this." This is a major step forward in the field of transplantation, the idea of organ banking, and the practice of it, the ability of doing it. World-leading heart transplant surgeon Professor Jacob Lavie concurs, saying, "Currently, transplant organs cannot be stored for a long time at all. So a high percentage of viable transplant organs are discarded before matches can be found and helicopter and jet transportation can be arranged. Hearts, for instance, can currently only survive 4 or 5 hours outside of the body. If we could get longer preservation so that just half of the wasted hearts and lungs could be used, the U.S. wait list for these organs would be extinguished in a few years." Today, something historic has happened. Today, the first ever Global Organ Banking Summit opened earlier in Silicon Valley. This is a 3-day event, and at this summit, some of the world's leading scientists in cryobiology and other related fields, as well as other key stakeholders, met and are still meeting tomorrow and Saturday to identify and tackle key medical challenges in an effort to revolutionize transplant medicine. 80 leading cryobiologists and scientific participants from around the world, plus leaders from government agencies, biotech, pharma, and other industries, VC and angel investing, as well as stakeholders and other philanthropic foundations, all meeting together. More than 20 top speakers from institutions like Harvard, Mass General, Stanford, MIT, Berkeley, the University of Minnesota, 21st Century Medicine, Cell and Tissue Systems, a business, who are on the cutting edge of cryobiology, and other leading specialists are already on board. This summit is also laying the groundwork for a high-stakes, high-visibility Grand Challenge Prize, an X Prize. It's very interesting stuff. So if you'd like to know more about this summit or about the Organ Preservation Alliance, Google this or email me. I'll send you a link. I'll be very happy to supply that with you. So folks, we have a presentation now by a gentleman who is one of the founders here of the Church of Perpetual Life, and someone I consider a good friend. Let's give a warm welcome to our own Mr. Bill Faloon.
Thank you very much, Neal. I hope no one took for granted the technology that you just saw on that YouTube video, because that was a culmination of probably 60 years of intensive research. And intensive research always involves a lot of failures. Research is fraught with failure. It just doesn't usually work for the most part. But if any of you all remember, and some of you are this age, December 3rd, 1967, front page headlines around the world, the first successful human heart transplant. That was done by Dr. Christian Barnard in South Africa. That patient lived 18 days. That was it. He died of pneumonia, complications of the immune suppression they were trying to induce, because, of course, the rejection factor has always been the big impediment to organ transplantation. But Dr. Barnard didn't give up. And we want to really credit and pay tribute to Dr. Barnard, because our church's premise here is we need to be very aggressive. We need to overcome the failures and continue to persevere. Just a few weeks after that first patient didn't make it, he did the second adult human heart transplant, January 2nd, 1968. That patient lived for almost 19 months. So we go from 18 days with the first patient to 19 months with the second. And there were some challenges along the road where they tried to do different experimental approaches. Unfortunately, a lot of failure. a lot of failure. And a lot of that failure occurred because there weren't the immunosuppressive drugs that are now available to enable these organ transplants to work without the graft-host disease. That's the rejection factor that precludes so many of these successful transplants. Now they're able to control the immune system in a way that most people are able to live extended lives. They're still shortened because of suppressing your immune system. That's not good, but it's certainly better than dying from heart failure, kidney failure, liver failure. I mean, you want to get that new organ despite the fact you have to suppress your immune system. What I'm going to do is put on a little presentation to explain what's really going on with the Organ Preservation Alliance. This group has amazed Neal and I so much. The volunteer effort that they are putting out, and these are a bunch of young people, by the way, under the age of 30, recognizing what needs to be done to enable a breakthrough occur. It's not going to occur unless some people put the energy into the type of project that these individuals are engaged in this weekend. So here we show a slide of people who were lucky, and you really are fortunate to be a recipient of an organ transplant. Someone else has to suffer a catastrophic injury, typically to their head, in order for harvestable organs to be available. And one of the challenges, by the way, with Dr. Christian Barnard was the ethical question. A lot of people thought this just should not be done, removing a beating heart from a living person and transplanting it into someone with severe congestive heart failure. There was a lot of questions as to whether or not that was morally, legally ethical, whether there was any scientific merit to it. Those researchers back in the early 1960s, they had to withstand a lot of harsh criticism. Even people who believed that one's soul resided in the heart. And people were saying, well, you're going to do this heart transplant, you're transplanting that dying person's soul into another human being. And that was the kind of criticism that they had to endure. But they persevered. And so there are people alive today who have organs that were transplanted into their body, and they're doing very well as a result of that. They're living in a healthy type of a situation. So again, our hats off to the Organ Preservation Alliance. They're doing some just incredible work. And some of that work involves finding better ways, not just to cryopreserve organs, but to store them for a longer period of time. Neal mentioned that there's only this short window in which you have to transplant a heart from a donor to a recipient. It's only 4 to 6 hours. Well, we know of some researchers who have extended that time much further. They're going at 24 hours and greater. They're able to use certain solutions to keep those hearts viable. So the technology is evolving in a very positive way so that we're able to take more harvestable organs and get them into the donors who need them. The ultimate objective, however, is to bring groups together to combine all this technology in such a way that we make the major breakthrough. And that major breakthrough is going to be the ability to cryopreserve hearts, kidneys, lungs, all kinds of nerve tissues, bone marrow. Do this in such a way that anybody who needs a transplant, anybody at all, will have access to a blood donor match, a tissue type match. They'll have access to an organ. There will be no more waiting lists. There'll be no more people dying for lack of a transplant. Very much analogous to the way there is blood banking right now. No one dies because there isn't any blood for them to put in their body if they need it. They have blood banks everywhere. The same technology will evolve in a way that there will be hearts, kidneys, lungs, there'll be organs available to transplant. So this is a major breakthrough. And this is an individual who we're looking at right now. She's dying. She needs an organ. I don't know what the outcome is right now, if she's received hers or not, but these are real people. They're real human beings. And in case you think some of these people did something to cause their need for an organ failure, that happens sometimes. But for the most part, they develop a disease in which their kidneys just are unable to continue to sustain the filtration system that's required. Or they develop a cardiomyopathy condition in which no treatment is available. They literally need an organ transplant in order to survive. They're just like everyone in this room. There's no difference. And the problem is there's a shortage of the organs that what we need for transplant. Not a shortage of donors, a shortage of the technology so that we can grab those organs from people who are tragically killed in accidents or dying from other problems, and then transplant them in a timely manner to those who are in need of it. So we've got a shortage of organs. We've got too many people dying needlessly. And a fundamental tenet of this church is to try to abolish involuntary death altogether. And when you see needless deaths occurring, well, we really want to create a service around that and say, here's something that we can do something about right here and now. We can make more donor organs available, and this could then enable many, many more people to live. So the need for the organ transplants far more greater than what the current availability is. And the solution, the easy solution to all this, simply is to find a way to preserve organs so that every single organ donor will have their organs harvested and preserved until the recipient is able to receive them. So this is our big challenge, is being able to eventually cryopreserve through a unique process known as vitrification. Cryopreserve those organs in a way that they'll be available for everybody. And what we have right now is a lot of apathy. People say, well, I don't need an organ transplant right now. It's not important to me, until their heart starts to fail, until their liver starts to degenerate to a point where they are dying. And all of a sudden, it's front and center. But as Neal mentioned, you form a support group. You get a lot of people together saying we need to do something. And yet these people, too many of them, are dying prematurely. They're dying needlessly. And we have individuals all around the world, by the way, facing this sort of problem. The technology exists to save their life, but we're just not implementing the infrastructure to transplant enough organs. The organ banking solution is going to revolutionize medicine in a way that people will no longer die. And of course, the problem is everywhere. Everybody comes down with problems in every country in which an organ transplant can mean the difference between life and death. This is something we need to address in a major way. So we have individuals, and again, I like showing people who are in need of something that could save their lives, because it puts a personal touch on it, just like that YouTube video did. These aren't strangers. These are people in our community, people that all of us eventually are going to know. I do know of several people, by the way, who obtained life-saving organ transplants, and they're living normal lives now because someone else donated an organ to them. So it definitely is a common, universal need, something that could revolutionize how long people live. So what we need to do is set up, again, these cryopreservation storage facilities once the technology is developed to safely preserve these organs without damaging their cells. So we've got solutions out there, hardcore projects that people are undertaking right now. As we speak right now, this conference, this summit, is occurring in Northern California. Some of the most brilliant cryobiologists in the world are getting together and saying, we've got to pool our resources together. We need to do something to make this happen very fast and not delay it, because there's been far too many delays for far too long. The technology, by the way, for organ preservation is evolving, but the technology to perfect transplantation, in other words, avoid the rejection process, well, that was solved in the early 1980s. They were able to do lots and lots of organ transplants right after they developed cyclosporin, which is the first immunosuppressive drug that was really working well. And yet, here we are 30 plus years later, and we're not getting enough of the organ transplants done. So the motivation for this service, and the motivation, fortunately, for this incredible group that's meeting in Northern California is, let's tackle this problem. Let's get a solution so that we can start to bank organs, so that we can store them and make them available as readily as blood is currently available, and even sometimes stem cells. There are people who are harvesting their own stem cells and cryopreserving them. And what you're going to hear next service, by the way, I believe that's March 26th, is that there are ways that we can harvest not just our stem cells, but other youth factors and cryopreserve them for our own future use. And we're looking at a way to extract them from younger people to hopefully reverse the aging process in older people. We've got technologies right now that people in this church are funding at this very moment, and what's going on in California is nothing short of unprecedented. So what we need to do, again, is advance the technology so that nobody ever dies again for lack of an organ transplant. It's something that should have been done long ago, and we're determined right now to make it happen. A lot of the research, by the way, that has been talked about is funded by different organizations that I have been involved in. This is an achievable objective. If we were back in the 1960s, by the way, people would say, well, that's impossible. You can't transplant organs. Everyone who's ever tried it has failed. And they would have been correct. Before December 3rd, 1967, never worked. It wasn't even working in laboratory animals. There was lots and lots of failures. In fact, that December 3rd, 1967 date, where the first successful human heart transplant occurred, that was a culmination of decades and decades of research by other individuals. And they kept adding to their knowledge base in such a way that they were able to eventually do the heart transplant. The first one didn't work very well. Second worked a lot better. And they kept advancing the technology. Now, this shows you how far we have progressed. A frozen kidney will not function. It is not repairable with today's technology. The straight frozen kidney, as you can see, is a block of ice. Ice forms jagged crystals. It damages the cells. The organ is of no value at this point in time. The other organ that you see, the vitrified organ, well, that looks like there's really nothing wrong with it at all. That is stored at a very low temperature. The temperature is the same, by the way, but it's not frozen. It's vitrified in such a way that there is very little damage being done to those cells in that kidney. This particular kidney, by the way, was taken from a live rabbit and transplanted into another rabbit, and it sustained that second rabbit's life. This was the first time in medical history this was done. This was done, by the way, in 1998. But most people don't even know this can be done. But they took a vitrified kidney and put it into another rabbit, and that rabbit survived. So we know right now we're on the right track. This is not Star Trek type technology. It exists here and now, except not enough effort is being put into it. So our advocacy here is more effort, and we're essentially echoing what's going on right at this very point in time at the summit in Northern California with a number of scientists who, again, their credentials are just so impressive. So many of these people, by the way, were Harvard graduates. That's the constituency of this group. And then they brought in people from MIT and others. And they're all working to make this almost a Manhattan project, something that has to get done real fast so we can overcome this problem. The sooner we overcome it, the fewer people will die. The technology involving cryopreservation has been worked on for a long time. NASA at one point thought they could cryopreserve astronauts and send them into deep space. It turned out that was a more challenging proposition than what they anticipated, so they gave up on that technology. Others, though, continued. And that's where the vitrification process came into being. Vitrification is not perfect yet. It has been proven in a laboratory model to work, but we're not that far away from human vitrification, and we need to accelerate it. And fortunately, a game plan is in place to make that happen. We've got the tools at our disposal right now to make something happen that a few years ago people would have said, well, you just can't freeze organs. There's all this damage that's being done. And they were unaware of the 1998 research where we show we could do it in a rabbit. We could vitrify a kidney at a very low temperature. And at that temperature, by the way, you could store that kidney for dozens of years. There wouldn't be any molecular changes to it. So we could theoretically have organ banks of people who were donating their organs, and the organs sat there for a long period, and they were still able to be resuscitated. So we've got the technology, we've got the knowledge, and I'm hoping that with this brain trust that's been developed, we're going to see some real breakthroughs occur in this type of science. And again, this church advocates people taking aggressive stances. We want to fulfill what we believe was the Creator's plan for mankind. That's us, to develop the technologies that will transform human life into an environment of perpetual abundance. That's the premise of this church. And what these people are doing is they're fulfilling the prophecy of Nikolai Fedorov. They're taking very affirmative action to make something happen, to improve the ability of medical doctors to do organ transplants. And they're going to do it in a lot of different ways. A lot of ideas are going to be exchanged. And I'm hoping there's going to be some breakthroughs announced at the end of the summit and for the next several months that's going to change the way people think about how we should deal with harvestable organs that are being squandered, being wasted. And that's unfortunately most of them. They're not being transplanted. So they're going to put together a prize. There are, by the way, some very wealthy people backing this. They want to see this happen. This is a charitable event, by the way. Someday someone may make some money off this, but the idea now is let's save lives, because it doesn't look like this is going to make a lot of money in the beginning. So it has to be a charitable type of situation. And the Organ Preservation Alliance, they're a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. That they are not in this for the money. They're in this to save lives. So we've got some people who are willing to put up money for a prize, and this is good news because it attracts news media coverage. And sometimes it attracts scientists who otherwise might not want to spend the time to put the effort into making something like this happen. So it's a proven way of capturing the public's attention. They're doing it. We're very grateful for it. We look forward to doing that ourselves, by the way, here at this church, eventually offering prizes to scientists to figure out some way to circumvent aging and some way to reverse aging. This is a group of some of these individuals, by the way, who are involved in the Organ Preservation Alliance. Their credentials, as I said, outrageously impressive. They don't have to be doing this. They could be making money doing all kind of other projects, but they've chosen to spend at least some of their time on this very charitable project that will benefit so many people that we don't even know. So these are just some of the final slides. This is, by the way, not my presentation. This is a presentation from the Organ Preservation Alliance. And these are just some slides showing what their objectives are, how they intend to accomplish their objective of finding a way to successfully cryopreserve hearts, kidneys, livers, lungs, bone marrow, all kinds of tissues that can be later used to save human lives. It's something that not enough people, frankly, are doing. Most people are just apathetic when it comes to human life, and certainly we at this church are not. That's the whole premise of this church being founded. We want to enlighten people. We want to educate about what we consider is the mandate, the common mandate of mankind, and that is we all contribute what we're able to, our time, our effort, our money, towards extending healthy human life and eventually abolishing, I'm talking about abolishing involuntary death. That is the mission of our church. This group here is just almost like an outgrowth of everything we've been talking about. This is the concluding slide, by the way, and I'm going to leave this up here for people to study. I like history, by the way. I don't know how many people in this audience do, but this shows how medical technology progresses. And as you can see there were a lot of successes and failures in the very beginning, and then it stopped because there were too many failures. They hadn't yet developed those immune-suppressing drugs, and they were losing too many patients because of the graft-host disease, the rejection factor. So they stopped doing the organ transplants, and then cyclosporin was discovered, and it resulted in their being able to do these transplants in such a way that people weren't rejecting the organs. So you can see the number of organs worldwide has skyrocketed. And the only limit to this skyrocketing is organ donors. And the big limit to utilizing the people who want to donate organs is lack of our ability to store those organs. That's the only problem. And we're going to solve what is killing hundreds of thousands of American lives every year. The problem will virtually disappear once we perfect the cryopreservation, vitrification of human organs that are donated but are not utilized. So again, we're going to leave that slide up just to see where the history has been. And as a compliment, we have to talk about Dr. Christian Barnard and the thousands of other pioneers who put in their time doing laboratory research in which I suspect their peers ridiculed them. They're saying, what are you trying to do here, transplant organs? It's impossible. And of course it was impossible because of the rejection factor. They developed that technology in the 1960s for humans, so surgically you could make that transplant occur, but the rejection factor kept it from occurring. And the naysayers, and they're all over the place, these pessimists who say you just can't make something happen. Well, they developed specific immune-suppressing drugs that kept just enough immune function going to keep you from dying from an opportunistic infection, but not so much that would kill your transplanted organ. So that development caused organ transplantation now to be a routine procedure when they have the organ available. So I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. If there's some parting words that Neal has, he's going to come up here. And our church continues to promote, as I said, longevity, health, and we want to accelerate the scientific advancement in the fields of research that involve saving human lives.